The C80 is not a Komodo competitor, it is a FX6 competitor. What's going on, guys? I'm Yashai, this is FireFace Films, and today we're talking about how the Canon C80 is not a Komodo killer. But before we do, make sure you drop a like, get subscribed, and click that bell to get notified when you post. Alright, on with the show. So, earlier this week, Canon announced the C80, the latest camera in their Cinema EOS line, and it's got a bunch of bells and whistles. Full frame 6K sensor, SDI and HDMI port, and a bunch of cool other stuff that the C70 didn't have. And since the announcement, I've seen a few takes saying that it is a Komodo killer, but I'm going to respectfully disagree, and I've got a few reasons why. None of them are in any particular order, but these are why I think this camera does not compete with the Komodo, but something else, which we will talk about. So first up, I will say that one of the biggest reasons it's not a Komodo competitor is that it is not at all optimized for anamorphic shooting. So if you look at the bevy of resolution and codec options for the C70, you will notice that none of them are anamorphic compatible. And if we judge what happened with the C70, and that camera came out 4 years ago and has had a number of firmware updates, at no point did they ever add anamorphic support. You're just gonna have to de-squeeze on your external monitor if you have one, and be ready to chop off a lot of extra side room and resolution. And I think it's probably not going to happen, if we're honest. Like I said, look at the C70. It's probably not going to happen. So that's definitely one way that the C80 is not a Komodo competitor or killer, because I mean that's our different use case, and that's kind of the theme of all the reasons it's not, is that these cameras are for different use cases. So the next one is that the raw codecs of the C80 are very limited in comparison to the Komodo and Komodo X by extension. And if I mention the Komodo, let's just call the Komodo X in there, because with the recent price drop, they're all pretty much in that pretty tight bracket of about $2,000 difference between all of them. And if you look at the raw options on the C80, all they really have is Canon RAW Lite CRL in full 6K, 4K, or drop down to Super 35, and that's kind of it. You can only go up to 60 at best in RAW on this camera, and then all the rest you're gonna have to do XAVCS or long op. So that's not necessarily ideal. Whereas you look at the RED Komodo, every single thing in that is RAW capable and RAW compatible, in addition to having those beautiful anamorphic formats. And then if you look at the actual body styles of both of these cameras, they obviously, the C80 still has the odd fat DSLR form factor of the previous C70, whereas the Komodo is the cube, which is very well designed for rigging. So it's not to say that you can't rig out the C80, but it's not going to be as rigging friendly, as all the ports are on the side, and it's that just fattened DSLR body, which is not as conducive to rigging. And then I gotta say, I've always kind of found comparing Super 35 and full frame sensors to be ridiculous in a way, because obviously all these cameras are tools and they're for different use cases, right? I mean, full frame ultimately is just about getting, well, I'm not gonna say it's about only getting that field of view, but it's a different tool, right? And Super 35 is a different tool. So if we're gonna compare different tools, it's like comparing a drill to, like comparing a handheld drill to a full-size like diamond cutting drill. They're kind of for different purposes, right? And that's a disparity to the capability of these cameras, but you kind of get what I mean, right? So between full frame and Super 35, I feel like it's a bit of a toss-up as to the usability. And speaking of the sensors, we already know that the C80's sensor is the same as the C400, so that's going to be a full-frame rolling shutter as opposed to the Super 35 global shutter of the Komodo. And for some shooters, global shutter is going to be pretty important. I don't know the rolling shutter value of this sensor, but obviously it's not low enough to be even close to competing with that global shutter. Not to say it's a bad rolling shutter value, but there is a significant difference, and to some shooters that might matter. I have to say, putting a camera of this caliber with SD cards in this day and age is borderline criminal. Now, obviously, this is one of the many reasons, one of the many cripplings of the C80 to not encroach further on the C400. I get it, but SD cards at this stage in the game are really annoying because they have not depreciated in value. Just like CFast 2.0, neither of those card types have depreciated in value, whereas you can get CF Express Type B cards. You can get a 1 terabyte, very fast CF Express Type B card for way less money than it would cost you to get an equivalent SD card, which I don't even think they make SD, actually, they don't make SD cards that get nearly as fast as CF Express Type B. And then you're gonna have to think about the data rates with this camera, right? If you're shooting that cinema raw light as best you can go, which is ST on this camera, it's gonna run up data really fast. So the best you can do with, I think, a V90 card, which is what you're going to need, I think is like 256. I think that's the highest capacity you can get. I'm gonna put up a graphic if I don't have that, if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, SD cards in this camera is a shame, but without encroaching on the C400, which is Canon's intent, I don't really know what else they could have put in at this point, which kind of blows. And that's also, you know, an inherited trait from the C70, but at the time it wasn't as big of a deal then, but it is now in 2024 and obviously going forward. Now, I don't think you can argue this, but I would say that the Komodo is more conducive to controlled shooting environments, right? And the C80 is more settled and ready for run and gun scenarios. Now, that's not to say you can't intermix them, but the C80 is going to be better for run and gun scenarios as it has the built-in NDs, it has the triple base ISO, and it's got a more, you know, I'll say inconspicuous body form factor if you need to run around and not really draw too much attention, whereas the Komodo, you're going to have to rig it up some. Like at minimum, you're going to have to rig it up some to get it going, and then it still might draw some attention. Yes, it's still small, but once you kind of get a few accessories on it, it's going to look a little awkward. And that's kind of why I believe that the C80 is not a Komodo competitor, it is a FX6 competitor. And I'm not going to say killer because killer is just overly dramatic and ridiculous what we're talking about here. But yes, if you really think about this price range, right? The C80 is $54.99 USD and the FX6 is $59.98 USD. And that's a $500 difference, but these cameras have way more overlap in what they're offering and what role they're trying to fill, as they are both full frame. They have internal ND, they have single SDI and single HDMI ports. They both have robust audio connections, although the C80 wins in this regard because the audio connections are built onto the body, whereas this FX6 has the connections built into the handle, in which if you remove the handle, you have no audio in the camera, which is an insane decision and should be rectified in the next version of whatever the FX6 is going to be. Obviously, any shooter any shooter in the game knows that by now. We know that. And yeah, I think these two cameras are more alike than the C80 is alike to the Komodo. Ultimately, it's good that this sector of cinema cameras is heating up, right? The competition is getting good. And you know what that means? We have better tools to create things with. And at the end of the day, yes, it's a camera, it's got specs, it can do this, that, and the other, but it is a tool. It is a tool, and it's up to you to decide if this tool is the right tool for you. I can imagine like some people might have an FX6 and a C80, although Sony and Canon shooters together, I haven't seen too much of that, but just imagine, right? Prime example, I have an X-H2S filming me right now, and then I have my Pocket 4K that I bring with me to shoot like more controlled things with. Like I'm gonna bring my X-T4 with me on a lot of jobs. I could call it X-T4, that's what I used to have. I'm gonna bring my X-H2 with me on a lot more jobs because it is versatile and it has autofocus, it has great dynamic range. But on the more controlled scenarios, when I'm shooting something that we have massive control over the lights, the design, and all that stuff, I'm going to bring the Pocket 4K because it does have, in my opinion, and also kind of scientifically, it does have a more robust image and obviously B-RAW built in. So this is one of the things where it's like you have to evaluate the right tool for the right job. So that's going to be it for us today. If you like what you saw, of course, please make sure you drop a like, get subscribed, and click that bell to get notified. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming. If you're like me and you keep running into really niche issues that you feel like you don't have an answer for, please stay tuned. One of the biggest ones is we're going to be testing B-RAW on the X-H2S. Not today, not this video, unfortunately, but it's coming soon. And like I had mentioned previously, we're talking about the D80 Theos, which is what I'm using to record right now. There's a lot of fun film tech stuff coming, a lot of experiments, a lot of things. We're going to learn stuff together. That's what we're always doing here. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.